Welcome to the Asian Supermarket. I'm your host Christina from America.
And I'm Carmen from Australia. Welcome to this week's episode with our friend Jet, where we discuss our upbringings as Asians in Western countries and the different values, traditions, and mentalities that we've adopted as a result of our environment.
So grab your favorite dish and let's chill together as we chat with another special guest in episode 3.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Asian Supermarket podcast, everyone. So today we have our guest Jet, who's actually coming to us from Wellington, New Zealand, in quarantine.
So me and Jet met around 2012 back in UCI when he was studying abroad, and we met through a dance crew. We were just joining some dance workshops. So Jet, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
I am from New Zealand. Well, I'm originally from the Philippines, but I moved to New Zealand when I was about 10 years old. Stayed there for a few years and then, went to college and then went to college just for a few semesters at California. And then after that, I went back to Wellington to finish my studies. And then, I'd always wanted to come back to California ever since, my study abroad. Yeah. So after I finished my studies, ended up working as an accountant. I was doing audit for a few years, and then basically they gave me the opportunity to come to Nashville. So I was actually working in Nashville for a few months before I was able to move to Orange County because I just wanted to transfer. So Orange County, LA for about 2 years. So that was between 2018 to 2021. And then, I decided to come back to New Zealand just to continue to pursue dance because I was over accounting. So that's basically kind of my journey in a quick snapshot.
Any unique Filipino food?
Filipino foods. Most people know about the adobo. I don't know if you guys have heard. Chicken adobo is quite popular. But it's basically just soy sauce, vinegar, a mixture of both. And then we have the garlic in there as well, which is pretty good. And then obviously the meat.
Yeah, no, everyone always talks about like balut, right?
Oh yeah, I haven't actually tried that because I did actually try it once when I was in the Philippines, but just the soup. I don't know if I can actually eat the whole chick by itself, but people actually love it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I heard that the flavor is really nice, but when I look at it, it's kind of like, oh.
So a fun fact we recently learned is there's more than 7,000 islands there. And, the people there are blessed with abundance of seafood, tropical fruits, creative cooks. And is there a favorite island you've been to in the Philippines?
Islands. I like actually the island of Bohol. It's just a little bit off Cebu, which is another kind of main city in the Philippines. But, they just have nice beaches, white sand and all that, which, we don't really have in New Zealand. Because I think in New Zealand, most of the beaches here are it's either rocky shores or we kind of have the sand is a bit dark and it has a lot of debris and stuff like that.
So speaking of food, Carmen, do you have a favorite Filipino food?
Me? Yeah. Personally, I really love that snack that they have called I think it's called chicharron or something.
Oh yeah, I thought you were vegetarian.
No, there's the packet one in the supermarkets, right? So I was in Philippines early this year. No, not this year, early 2020, last year. And I just love, they have the one made from peas, I think. So it's apparently it's the healthy version because apparently the pork one isn't healthy.
Interesting. Yeah, it's just pork. What's actually interesting about that is I went to Mexico. I think that was the end of 2020 as well. No. 2020 was last year. So it was 2019. I went to Mexico City and then they also had the same thing. And I think they call it the same as well, chicharron. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how, you come to Mexico and Latin America and they have the same food as the Philippines, which is all the way in Asia. But I don't know if you guys know that the Philippines was actually colonized by Spain back in the 1500s. So I guess that kind of makes sense.
What about you, Christina? Do you have a favorite food?
I would say it'd be lumpia.
Oh yeah, another classic.
How did you find growing up in New Zealand as a Filipino, as an Asian person? Would you grow up in an area with a lot of other Asian people? Who did you hang out with?
Our parents, for people my age, it's usually our parents that would have, moved here first. So I don't think any Filipino parents would have been born in New Zealand at this point. So I think for us, actually, our culture is more sort of the same, or it has really close similarities to, the Filipino culture. And I just kind of mentioned that because from my observation, studying abroad in America, Filipino Americans are actually kind of a bit different. I can't really specifically say how, but you can kind of just tell in terms of, I guess, their how do you say it, like their way of thinking feels more like they're not really Filipino.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that kind of makes sense, because like, when you meet Filipinos, it's just like, I don't really know, is it like the topics that they talk about or things like that? But with like Filipino Americans, it's more.
You mean like
Okay.
it's something like the way you communicate, right? Like code switching, right? Like when you speak
Yes,
to
yes,
someone
yes.
who's like,
The way we
who's like from
communicate.
yeah, like someone who's like for me, I'm Singaporean, but I'm Chinese, right? So when I speak to like a Singaporean person, like who I know like grew up in Singapore, we like have our Singlish accents, and like I change like completely like my accent, like the way I speak and stuff. But if I'm speaking to someone who grew up in like, even though you're a Singaporean, but like you're putting on an Australian accent or whatever, and like I will like speak about different things, and the way I speak is different. You know what I mean? It's something like that, right?
Okay, that's funny, because that's actually, I feel like that's kind of another topic. But that is like what I wanted to say as well about like Filipino New Zealanders, because I don't think other Asians in New Zealand actually do the same thing. But I have noticed with Filipinos, we mainly have three accents. So it's just like, one is the New Zealand accent, and then one is the American accent. And then the other one's like Filipino New Zealand, which is kind of a mix between like, both, which is kind of interesting. And, I chatted with a few other people from my city, and, they had like the same experiences. But basically, when we speak with New Zealanders, it's like the New Zealand accent. Christina, when I came to America, I probably didn't have much of an accent, because I probably was using my American accent. But we go back to New Zealand, and when we talk to other Filipinos, we would just have our Filipino New Zealand, which is kind of just like the New Zealand accent, but we'd have certain words that are like American, or maybe the other way around. So just kind of be like, like talking normally, and then all of a sudden we say things like dance. It's just like, oh, I can't dance.
Yeah.
So in a
Things
way,
like that.
New Zealand and Australian accents are similar, right? Because Karma, you kind of talk like that too, right? Like, it's like, Would you say there's a bigger population of Filipinos in New Zealand or California?
Yeah, definitely not. It's definitely California, because in California they have things like the Filipino channel, like a lot of like Filipino supermarkets, but we don't quite have that in New Zealand yet. I don't think there's enough Filipinos for that. So they say, but there is kind of enough. A little bit of background on that as well. So I came 2003, and when I first moved here, I think we knew most of the Filipinos in the city. Around 2009, I think, was when a lot of the Filipinos just started coming from the Philippines. So those are the ones that it's actually because of those Filipinos that I started speaking more, Tagalog and like Filipino, which I can speak. So I can speak and understand Filipino fluently, but growing up in New Zealand when I first came here around 2003, none of the Filipinos really kind of, at least around my age, no one really spoke Filipino, because I guess most of the Filipinos were either born there or just grew up there as well, where because there wasn't really a lot of like Filipinos, we never really had the chance to kind of speak Filipino. I don't know, did you have the same experience in Australia?
Yeah, well, when I moved here, it was 2004, and I moved to like a kind of rural area, and there was like hardly any Asian people in my area. And I want to ask you, like when I was growing up, I didn't really like, well, because there wasn't any Asian people, and like at the same time, like I didn't really gravitate towards Asian people when I was younger. So like I kind of like tried to denounce that part of my culture. And like I went to these places, I was like, I don't want to speak like Mandarin. I don't want to like, I don't know anything about Asia, things like that. Like, did you do that as well?
I feel
Oh,
like that's an American Filipino thing to do, but
yeah.
I definitely didn't really for me my experience was more, it's not that I kind of did that, it's just I didn't really have much opportunity.
Yeah.
Like I said, we don't have the Filipino channel, so I wasn't
Yeah.
exposed to that. All I did was go to school and everyone spoke English, so that's kind of what I did as well. And eventually got used to that. We'd come home, and I think this is why we also have like the two different accents, because we'd grow up around our classmates who would have like the New Zealand accent, and then we'd come home to our parents who have the American sort of accent. So that's why the Filipino New Zealand accents is kind of like hybrid in that way.
No, I think there's a lot of cultures like that. Like, I don't want to be like stereotypical or anything, but I find that like after interacting with a lot of like Asian kids from my generation and like the older generation, I find that like I don't know why, but like personally from my experience, like people from Singapore, Malaysia, like we don't really like try and enforce the language on our kids, on like on on like on the generation. When we come to a country, we kind of just like default to English and we don't really like enforce it. But I find that people from like China, or like Japan or Korea, they really take like a pride in their own language and they really try and teach their kids the language. And I don't know why that is. It's like just interesting.
That's so true. I think we share the same experience in that though, like
Yeah.
culturally.
Like, I don't know if it's because like they want like us to like integrate better, or if it's because like they don't see it's that important or something. But it's just like even though we're all Asian, it's like different cultures just like see a different importance, in like learning languages.
Do you feel like you're more Westerner now? Like you don't really have that much of a cultural lifestyle?
Because you said before, right? Like you find that for our generation, because our parents are the ones that are from Asia, like they kind of bring more of that culture over. Do you think that you've like retained any of it, or it's like mostly just like whatever? Like, do you cook?
That's actually a really hard question to like answer, because I feel like it's a mixture of a lot of things. Like what would it be? Like Filipinos always being late. That definitely carried over. And I'm just kidding. No, but I don't know. Like I think it would have to be like specific parts of the culture that we've retained, and also kind of what we've refined, I would say. For example, what is it? I mean, I don't really want to put like Filipinos in a negative light, but there is that kind of trait where there's always a lot of like gossip and like drama, and that's something that like we have probably been able to kind of move away from as like kind of the next generation, I would say. But I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell.
It's interesting that you say that, because like actually a few days ago I was talking to like my Filipino friend, and she just got engaged, and she was saying that like not to like put stereotypes on Filipino people, but she was saying that like her Filipino friends who were like from the Philippines, all they could talk about was like her ring and stuff like that. But then all her other friends were just like, oh, like happy that she was like engaged and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, oh, it's kind of like weird how they do that. But I was like, no, like it's just like growing up differently. This is just how we are. Like because of the way we grew up.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of an example as well. So like in the Philippines, they're all about like their brands and stuff like that. But like for us, like who grew up in New Zealand, like it doesn't really matter so much for us, which is I think one of the differences that I've seen.
A lot of Asian countries though, right? Because we have outlets here, and then a lot of the people that come from Asia buy like Gucci, Coach, those things.
Yeah.
And I feel like America and Australia, New Zealand, we're like chill, right? It's like what looks good, what feels good. It's not necessarily different. Yeah.
It's kind of like less of an importance on like the materialistic stuff. But I guess like you have to understand, like if you've grown up in that kind of environment where you feel like it's important, then I guess like who is to judge, right? Like that's just how you grew up, and if you think that is important, then so be it.
Then how's like the pandemic life for you?
For me, it's kind of hard to tell, because I'm kind of in limbo where I'm not really in New Zealand, because I'm just in a hotel and quarantine facility. So I can't really tell. But like, it sounds like everyone in New Zealand is doing well. I don't think they've had to wear a mask in like quite a while, which is I think something I'd have to adjust to when I get back.
Uh-huh.
Um,
We chatted with another friend of ours that's under quarantine in Korea, and she literally can't go outside her room. But I saw in your stories, Jet, you are able to go outside, right? Like you guys, it looks like jail, but do you
oh
want to talk?
yeah, we have when we first get here, 24 hours we're not allowed outside of our room. They take our test and then we can't go out until they it returns negative like the next day. And then we do also get like exercise times where we're allowed to just go out into the exercise area that they have for us. Um, and that's basically it. And I think we can only stay there for 30 minutes or, maximum 30 people. I think either or of those. Is it normal for, I guess, like Australian Asians to kind of move out early or even actually just as Australians in general? When do you guys move out?
Well, like I guess it would be the same for New Zealand people. Like most of my Western friends have moved out. Like at uni, like when you go to uni, a lot of them move out, to like rent and stuff like that. But for me, like personally, I feel like financially it is wiser to stay home. And like my family, like I love my family, I'm really close with them. So it's like I don't see the need to move out yet.
Mm.
And like also like for work, like I work with my mom on online business. So it's like a lot, like it makes more financial and like work sense to just like stay
Yeah.
home. Like it's easier for everyone. But what about like it's the same in New Zealand, right? Like
Yeah, I was actually wondering, do you think that's more of an Asian culture
yeah,
to like just kind of stay back at home and like save and stuff? Because in New Zealand, I know most people actually move out at 18. They start flatting at 18 and that's basically it. But you'd see a lot of like Asian New Zealanders like staying back at home.
yeah, no, for sure. Like I think it's more of an Asian mentality as well. Unless I feel like my Asian friends, the ones who have moved out, are either like they've gone to study abroad and then they're like living in the country where they studied in, or they've just like relocated for work. But like I don't have many Asian background friends who have like moved out but like still been in like proximity of their family, you know what I mean? Like it's pretty rare. Whereas like I do have a lot of Western friends who have like moved out, but like they've literally just moved like an hour away or like half an hour away,
Yeah.
And it's like
Same for me. I mean, I technically kind of moved out of like I moved out at 21 just to move to another city where I started my career in accounting and then basically did that and then ended up going to the States. So I've kind of lived out of home for a while, but now that I kind of just want to well, actually, my main motive in like coming home was really just to one, like be back with family and also just to kind of continue pursuing dance, which obviously it was kind of hard to do that in the US when everything is just like shut down and then open and then shut down open. Um, but now that I'm going back, I plan to just kind of like stay at home for a while. So
how did your family feel, like you said, like about pursuing dance now instead of like
oh my gosh, yeah. So exactly that's why I'm like I think my parents want me to like, find a job like ASAP. I just kind of want to rest a little bit, but like take my time, like trying to figure out how like the dancing, would like work back here in New Zealand, just settling in. But I think for them it's more like kind of I don't know if that's the Asian mentality, is just like it's hard kind of getting into the arts because it's just not really kind of a secure career path, whereas I think security is what at least my parents are kind of used to
yeah, no, for sure. But like growing up, did your parents have that like that Asian mentality of like, oh, go to school, like get good grades?
Okay, I know like a lot of my friends in New Zealand, like they still had that. And I think they definitely do have that in the US where, parents tell you to just either become a nurse or I don't know what the other profession is, but like for me, actually my parents were pretty relaxed. They didn't really care so much about that. I think it was just me. I don't know, it must be somewhere in my Asian genes to just be like, it makes sense to be an accountant. And then, but then further down the line, I was like, actually, I want to, pursue dance. So here I am.
What about you, Christina? What was your upbringing like? Like, were your parents like, did they have a big emphasis on like getting good grades, getting a job, or were they more like, come join the family business? Like,
I mean, they're really chill. It's not like, the typical family since my family comes from a art, creative
Yeah.
background. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think it was their hopes that I would take over,
Mm.
but it wasn't my intentions. It just
Yeah.
happened. Yeah.
I feel you're a different breed because your family was already in the creative
Yeah.
background kind of thing.
Yeah. Cause all my other friends, like, they're all either in tech or business. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think for us it's like pretty different because my family is the same as well. Like my mom is more like a business background, and she was like not like an Asian mom at all. She would be like when I went to uni, she was like, why are you like wasting money on like going to uni? Like why don't you just like take that money and like start a business? And she was like, and she would always say things like why are you like, I'll be like, oh, I'm just doing schoolwork, and she'll be like, why are you doing schoolwork now? It's like due in 2 weeks. Like I know you can't do schoolwork now, like you won't even concentrate. Why don't you just do it like 3 days before? And I'll be like, oh. Okay, mom.
You're more Asian than your mom.
Yeah, no, my mom was like so relaxed about that. And she would always like encourage us to like, just do whatever you want, like as long as you're happy. But no, it's just so interesting, like hearing about, how we all grew up. And no, why don't we just like, let's just wrap it up.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jet.
No, thank you for having me.
Stay tuned for next week's special episode as we speak with a guest from the medical field who is an Iranian American. He has studied abroad in London, Hong Kong, Colombia, and worked in the Greek islands off the coast of Turkey, in refugee camps, the island of Samos as a Persian medical translator, and has worked in a Dutch NGO. He is currently a medical student living in Philadelphia and will be giving us a cultural history glimpse into the world of Persia.